Afternoon. I'm Spot on Weather, meteorologist Matthew Euler, and welcome to my latest video. This one is Mischief on the Horizon is the title. I'm listing that for a reason. You can kind of see the lady's look here, her look on her face, just kind of looking like she's getting to be mischievous a little bit here. And I'm going to go more in detail why I believe there's mischief on the horizon. Um, right now, things are pretty benign across the eastern U.S. Very mild temperatures, very above normal for this time of year in the first few days of January. But I do believe there are some interesting things that are sitting out there on the horizon based on the latest model guidance from today. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. All right, first things first, present time, same old situation, okay? We look at this is the 250 millibar winds and knots, generally showing some very strong winds denoted by these whiter colors and the brown colors here. This is your main jet stream axis across the Pacific Ocean right now for today, the 3rd of January. And really not much has changed since my last video a few days ago. We're seeing a very strong jet stream, oriented more of a west-east high zonal flow or direction to it, orientation to the jet stream. So this continues to basically direct systems toward the western coast of the U.S., the west coast of the U.S., specifically in California, where they've had some extremely heavy snows in the Sierra Mountains, the Sierra Nevada range. A lot of heavy snow in the mountains, heavier rain towards the coast of California. And generally what this kind of configuration does, as I mentioned in my last video, it generally tends to send milder Pacific air across the country, generally from west to east. All right, so we have a strong Pacific jet here today on the 3rd of January. Not much change. Now we look at the forecast here on the right. I'm now starting to show a little bit of a dipping or a troughing configuration here in the eastern Pacific Ocean by the time we get to next Monday, the 9th of January. We're starting to see these bends or these kinks in the jet stream over more troughing over the eastern U.S. And then basically east or downstream of that troughing, you're getting height rises across parts of the west coast of the United States by next Monday, the 9th of January. These are the latest forecast graphics, by the way, of today's midday run from the GFS model. Now, the milder air will continue in the short term. Make no mistake about it. Here is the map for today, the 3rd of January. We're looking at 500 millibars, showing the configuration of the troughs and ridges of the upper atmosphere. What we're seeing here in the green coloring is cooler temperatures and lower heights, generally more unsettled conditions, a lot of precipitation occurring on the west coast of the United States. And then over in the Midwest to the East Coast, specifically New England down the Mid-Atlantic, we're looking at temperatures on the order of 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. We have an upper level ridge, generally orientated right off the East Coast at the present time with a ridge axis extending back up towards New England. We look at the graphic here for tomorrow, the forecast graphic here from the GFS Ensemble forecasting system showing a deep trough over the eastern Pacific. We have a little bit of ridging or height rises along the immediate west coast. And then we have an upper level closed low of 500 millibars over southern Minnesota. And we have some abnormally lower than normal heights across Kansas into Oklahoma and the panhandle of Texas for tomorrow, the 4th of January. So we do have a trough generally moving towards the east. We still see that upper level ridge extending from just off the east coast up to New England for tomorrow, the 4th of January. So we're expecting another mild day. Now, in association with this upper air trough, we're going to have a surface cold front, which is going to be moving from west to east, approaching the east coast, specifically by late tomorrow on the 4th of January and into Thursday, the 5th of January. That surface cold front will eventually make its way through the east coast and then offshore into the western Atlantic. So another mild day tomorrow, though, ahead of that cool front. We're expecting temperatures to be in the lower 70s, for example, in parts of the Carolinas right up to Virginia tomorrow. Now, what are some things, again, that we could look at here in the future that may change this mild pattern in the east? Let's start with a look. We'll examine the stratospheric polar vortex forecast, the latest forecasts. I've been sharing a lot of these forecast graphics on social media lately, whether it's Twitter, whether it's LinkedIn, as well as on Facebook. Generally, what we're looking at here is the forecast, the GFS forecast. We're looking at stratospheric temperatures and the anomalies in degrees Celsius, okay? So we're looking at, the purple shading indicates below normal temperatures in that second layer of the atmosphere that's known as the stratosphere. When we're looking at the maroon colors, the orange colors, even some of the browner colors here over on the far right, that's indicative of above normal temperatures in that second layer of the atmosphere, the stratosphere, okay? What I want you to pay attention to is the orientation of these colder colors, the greens, the blues, and the purples. This generally shows us that the polar vortex in the stratosphere is becoming more elongated or stretched out. Notice how this pattern is more stretched or elongated. All right, so this is the forecast for this Saturday, the 7th of January, the GFS forecast. And you notice that elongation effect right on from central Canada, Hudson Bay, right on down into the northern plain states, the United States. And then the graphic here in the middle showing the GFS forecast, notice the elongation continues and it's moved slightly to the east, these cooler stratospheric temperatures, over into parts of New England, down to the upper Midwest, as well as some portions of the eastern U.S. by this forecast for next Tuesday, the 10th of January. And then over here on the right, we still see some of that elongation look. The purple coloring here indicates the coldest temperatures in the stratosphere. And notice how they generally tend to position themselves down into southeastern Canada. You notice this deep purple here, well over the North Pole area, how it shifts to the southeast in this third graphic here on the far right, over southeastern Canada and parts of Maine. By this forecast here on the far right is the GFS outlook for 16 January. So GFS is very aggressive in showing this elongated shape of the polar vortex. The GFS ensemble forecasting system forecast showing very similar situation here, specifically on the forecast here on the left for this Saturday, the 7th of January 2023. Notice the stretching here of the colder temperatures, generally down into the northern plain states on the 7th of January, this Saturday. And the graphic here in the middle showing the forecast from Jeff's GFS ensemble system, generally with the coldest temperatures in the stratosphere located over the polar area, with elongation of that down into parts of southeastern Canada and Maine. And then the far right graphic here shows the Jeff's forecast for for 2 Mondays, so not next Monday, but the following Monday, the 16th of January, mid-January, showing that elongated look again of the polar vortex stretching from the North Pole right on down into southeastern Canada, Nova Scotia area, and Maine. And then finally, the European forecast for the stratospheric polar vortex. This only goes out 240 hours, vice the ensemble run, for example, which is a little bit further, as well as the GFS, which is further out to 384 hours. But in general, we have the same look here. 7 January, look at the European model forecasts showing the stretching out or that elongated appearance occurring. And then over here on the right is the forecast for Thursday, the 12th of January, 2023, showing the coldest temperatures in the stratosphere over the North Pole area. But we do see that elongation again towards southeastern Canada, Nova Scotia area. So bottom line here, whether we're looking at the GFS, whether we're looking at the JEFs, or whether we're looking at the European model, we're seeing an elongation to the polar vortex in the stratosphere. Now, I know I've seen posts on social media. Everybody's talking about how strong the polar vortex is right now in the stratosphere. I understand that. But what I'm really focused in on is the shape or the stretching of the vortex. If the stretching and elongation does occur, there is a probability that colder temperatures could occur in the eastern United States over time. So that's something to keep an eye on. Now, the MJO forecast, this is the latest update. And, this is real interesting. I've been watching this for the last couple days. And I'm showing you 3 different forecast graphics for the MJO, Madden-Julian Oscillation Forecast. First one here on the left is the Jeff's V12, generally showing the Madden-Julian Oscillation going into phase 8, definitely between the 13th and the 17th of January per the latest guidance. The middle graphic showing the CFS V2 extended outlook, showing very similar. Okay, a little bit greater magnitude on the CFS V2 as compared to the Jeff's over here on the left. But in general, we're in the same time frame, 13 to 15 January. We see the MJO increasing in magnitude and working its way into phase 8. And then eventually the CFS V2 brings it into phase 1 basically between the 16th and the 21st of January, before rotating the MJO into phase 2. Graphic here on the right, the European model forecast, again, very much in agreement with the other models. A little bit slower with the overall phase change of the MJO, but generally it's in that same range, 15 to 17 January on the European forecast into phase 8 for the MJO. So overall, to summarize these three graphics, Jeff's moving MJO into phase 8, European now in agreement with the Jeffs, as well as the CFS V2. So now we're starting to get a little more consistency, which we look for in the models as far as the MJO forecast going towards phase 8. We look at the European extended outlook here on the left, showing the MJO also rotating into phase 8 from looks like the 12th of January right on into the 17th of January, before the European extended outlook takes the MJO between the 17th and the 22nd into phase 1. So 8 and 1 for the forecast for the MJO on the European extended, before rotating it into weaker phase 2 and then to the null phase. Here is the temperature composites as a reminder for January, February, and March. Blue coloring indicating negative anomalies or below normal temperatures, and the orange coloring, the brighter orange coloring, indicating positive anomalies in the temperature department or above normal temps. Generally showing MJO phases 8 through 3 will feature colder temperatures in the eastern U.S., with the main most favorable phases for colder temps in the east being phase 8 and phase 1. Right, so we have agreement on the MJO that we could be heading towards a colder phase potentially, to where we're getting the convection upward vertical motion in the tropical areas into the western hemisphere. Looking at the latest Teleconnections forecast now. Let's see if this has changed from my last video. The European EPS, I'm using the European ensemble for all four of these graphics. The European EPS AO Arctic Oscillation 50 perturb member forecast, showing a general negative trend of the AO, working its way closer to neutral by the 12th of January, and then remaining slightly negative right on through the 17th of January before going neutral again. The European Ensemble NAO 50 perturb member forecast over here on the upper right, showing a general negative phase initially between the 5th and the 9th of January, becoming neutral after that, and then just generally tends to ride the neutral line all the way out through the 18th of January for the NAO. Looking at the graphic here in the bottom left, that's European EPS 50 perturb members. This is the EPO forecast, showing a slight dip to negative around the 5th of January, not lasting very long though, going back positive from 5 to 10 January, right on into 11 January, before becoming neutral and then going positive again. So, with the previous cold air outbreaks we saw in the eastern U.S., we had a much more strongly negative EPO, much further down here, magnitude -3, -4, and we don't see that in the future here, right on through the 18th of January. The graphic here on the right shows the European EPS, PNA, Pacific North American Pattern 50 perturb member forecast, showing a positive phase of the PNA, which generally promotes ridging in the western U.S. and troughing in the east. And that positive phase of the PNA lasts right on through mid-January, lasting just about to the 16th of January, in fact. Now, let's take a look at some interesting upper air charts today from the latest model guidance at midday, the 12Z model runs, showing first the European Ensemble Prediction System forecast. I'm showing the graphic here on the left is the forecast for this Sunday, the 8th of January, showing general mild temperatures overall across the eastern U.S. on Sunday. In fact, the latest operational models on the European even showing a little bit of a ridging situation, a little bit of a cool down Friday and Saturday in the mid-Atlantic, for example, and then a slight ridging feature at 500 millibars, a shortwave ridge, which could result in some milder air temporarily coming back in. But in general, a very mild looking pattern, generally from the Rockies to the East Coast, on the 8th of January, this Sunday, in the upper air configuration. Over here on the right, showing the 500 millibar forecast heights and anomalies for next Wednesday, the 11th of January. Now you'll notice this blue shading now has replaced this orange shading, generally off the southeastern coast. And this is in association with a low pressure system at the surface, lower heights in the upper levels of the atmosphere, troughing feature at shortwave at 500 millibars. We do have a little bit of ridging across the central U.S. by this point next Wednesday, the 11th of January. Then we have this very, very strong trough, very deep trough into the Gulf of Alaska by next Wednesday, the 11th of January. Bottom line here is, looking at the overall animation of these type of charts, I'm seeing a lot of transient troughs moving from west to east beneath this upper level ridge to the north over Hudson Bay. There are some troughs that are going to kind of skirt from California right on over towards the mid-Atlantic and the southeast coast. There'll be occasional disturbances coming through, increasing the chances for precipitation across the mid-Atlantic and the southeast. If we look at the real interesting upper air charts from the midday runs today that really have my interest, the European Ensemble prediction forecast on the left, and then I want to throw the GFS Ensemble forecasting system forecast on the right. I want to just put them side by side so you can see the comparisons. Notice the placements of the troughs off the U.S. West Coast, the ridging here in the orange coloring over central Canada up in Hudson Bay, and then this troughing off the East Coast. Very similar placement of these features, right? You will notice that the European Ensemble tends to make these troughs deeper. You'll see the green coloring here on this graphic on the left, whereas over here on the right, you don't see that. You just see the blue coloring for lower than normal heights. Not as great, not as significantly lower as compared to the EPS. And so the positioning of these features, the trough, the ridge, the trough, they do match up fairly well. We do see, and we do notice, to me, I see a storm signal here off the U.S. southeast coast by the middle of the month. I'm talking 14 to 15 January. And by the way, that should be 2023 up there. So I'm still getting used to the fact that we're in a new year. Have you ever done that where you just kind of put the date and you're like, oh crud, it's a new year, it should be 2023. But in general, did I do the same thing here? No, I didn't. Okay. But in general, we see a storm signal here when we see this troughing develop right along the east coast and the lowest heights being just right offshore of the southeast coast. So really going to be watching this closely. You notice this ridging here, these heights up here are pretty good height rises here upstream with that digging trough off the southeast coast. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here if anything develops at the surface as far as low pressure in the storm system. And where does that storm go? Does it go just straight out to sea and miss the entire east coast? Does it intensify here and then kind of right up the coast, up to the mid-Atlantic, head out to sea? There's a lot of potential solutions here that, we're just too far out in time. This is just pattern identification at this point, okay? This far out, pattern identification, that's all it is. All right, and then to show the temperature anomaly forecast to match this potential storm signal, I'm showing this is European ensemble anomalies and ensemble mean degrees Celsius temperatures here, showing cooler or below normal temperatures in the blue, and the green even more significantly cooler than normal across Florida. This is for the morning of the 15th of January 2023. And then you'll notice here on the right, this is the Jeff's ensemble mean temperature anomalies showing slightly cooler than normal temps across the southeast. So bottom line here, what I'm trying to get at here is the storm signal's there around the 14th to 15th of January, and then we also have cooler than normal temperatures at the same time. Now, will this air be cool enough to, let's say, produce wintry precipitation somewhere along the East Coast? Way too early to tell. But I will say that a lot of this, temperature profile will be dependent on how strong the storm becomes. If you get a deeper, more intense storm off the coast, that could allow much colder air to come down on its backside. If you get a weaker storm off the coast, that will still allow milder air to remain mainly over the mid-Atlantic, resulting in many cases a rain event, a cold rain event. So really, it's going to be dependent on the strength of this low pressure system if in fact it does develop at the surface. Just wanted to put that out there. Here are the final thoughts on today's video. Generally, we're expecting mild air to continue in the short term, right on through this Thursday, the 5th of January, across the eastern U.S. and mid-Atlantic specifically. A colder period is expected from Saturday, the 7th of January, this Saturday coming up, right on through Wednesday, the 11th of January. Now, when I say colder period, I'm not talking about extremely frigid cold like we saw back at Christmas. I'm just talking about temperatures dropping to more near normal levels for early January, vice the well above normal temperatures we're seeing right now in the mid-Atlantic, starting off the year 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit above normal in the temperature department. The Pacific jet stream configuration is forecast to change, and we'll see these occasional kinks or bends in the overall upper air flow over the eastern Pacific from 9 January right through middle of January. Okay, that's important because that's going to it's like a garden hose, right? You get this huge garden hose pointed at you, and that water just keeps pointing right towards California on that garden hose. Eventually, if you pinch off the hose a little bit, it stops the water from flowing through it. And that's what's happening right here when you get this troughing right in the eastern Pacific. It's like you're putting your thumb on a garden hose and you're pushing down that garden hose and you're preventing that water from more readily flowing through there. So this definitely could break up the overall pattern, the hemispheric circulation, to where now we got troughing and then ridging off the west coast of the United States. So we're watching that closely and just look for any changes to that. We do see a weakening La Nina, elongated stratospheric polar vortex potential, and then an MJO rotating towards colder phases, mainly phases 8 and 1, by mid-January, which that could lead to a colder, longer range period, late January overall. Now, one thing I mentioned yesterday on social media too is whenever you have elongated stratospheric polar vortexes or these MJO changes into different phases, the atmosphere is not instantaneous. It's not like flipping the switch on in your house in a room. When you turn your light on at night, the atmosphere doesn't really work like that. And so a lot of times these changes occur, whether we're talking a weakening La Nina, or whether we're talking about elongated stratospheric polar vortexes and MJO changes, the tropical forcing in the equatorial Pacific. That doesn't result in an immediate change, and I think a lot of people, they look at these changes and they think they're going to happen just with a flip of a switch, and that's really not the case. There's a little bit of a lag time there of how the atmosphere responds to these changes. So if we see the MJO really playing into it, increasing in amplitude or magnitude into the colder phases, we might not see those effects of colder temperatures until a week after that occurs. And right now, the models really aren't picking up on these colder phases yet, and they have a very difficult time, the models in the long range, determining the effects or impacts of the stratospheric polar vortex behavior and how that changes. Additionally, we're looking at an active looking pattern. We're going to see multiple upper air disturbances moving from west to east. California is going to continue to get hit hard with a lot of heavy rainfall and mountain snow in the Sierras. We expect that these storm systems or these upper air disturbances generally move in a west to east direction from California right to the mid-Atlantic and the southeast coast. This is more reminiscent of an El Nino pattern again, how active the southern branch is. And so, you look at El Nino winter type patterns in the mid-Atlantic, and they generally tend to produce above normal snowfall, believe it or not. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how this all pans out. Just on today's 12Z GFS operational run, for example, I counted about 3 to 4 particular disturbances that could produce precipitation in the mid-Atlantic or the southeast over the next 10 days. And so they just keep coming one after another. Some of these upper air disturbances are going to yield the precipitation into the area, but temperatures will still be too mild in many cases for any wintry precipitation. Specifically, when we look at the period around this period here, generally the 11th of January, it looks still a little bit too mild. But then as this system potentially develops 14 and 15 January, there could be just enough cold air here in this trough that could result in some wintry precipitation. So something to keep an eye on. Yes, I know we don't have a slam dunk case of very cold Arctic air for these storm systems to work with, but sometimes it doesn't take that. You can still get these winter events despite temperatures not being super cold. I've seen it before. There is that big storm potential in the middle of January per the latest ensembles, but there, we have that more ridging to the west and a deeper trough in the southeast. I've noticed the changes here over the last day or so of the model runs. This looks very favorable for some sort of surface low pressure system or storm to develop off the southeast coast. Again, way too early for details. We don't know if this is going to track out to sea, if this is going to hang out and intensify, drag more colder air down its backside, and maybe it just skirts the mid-Atlantic coast just enough to track to where you get snow on the backside and frozen precip. Just way too early to tell. These are just, again, this is just trend pattern recognition and trend recognition. That's all this is right now, not the details. If that storm were to intensify, though, we definitely could see much colder air being dragged down its backside, resulting in wintry weather. If that storm is weak, we're most likely going to see a case where we're going to get cold rain in the Mid-Atlantic. And in some models, some of the operational models are just showing that particular storm developing and deepening rapidly, but then heading out to sea. So again, just like any time in the winter when we talk about East Coast storms, there's a wide varying range of possibilities of these systems, whether they're true coastal cyclones that significantly impact areas along the East Coast, or they just harmlessly go out to sea. And so something to keep an eye on, though. So what I'm getting at here is, I've seen all the posts on social media lately about, hey, winter's over, winter's over. It's just going to be a torch of a winter. You just cannot say that. We're sitting here on the 3rd of January. If this was the 3rd of March, okay, I definitely can understand your angst. But this is only the 3rd of January, and there's still a lot of winter ahead of us. And in fact, for many across the Mid-Atlantic and New England, January and February, specifically February, can really produce some big storms. And so to just say that winter's over already prematurely is just crazy, in my opinion. I know the pattern doesn't look very cold right now, but the big thing is things can change in a hurry in the winter months. Definitely can change in a hurry. All right, that wraps this video up today. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Until next time, everybody, take care and God bless everyone.